It is indeed. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another roundtable.
We can hear you typing, Ratbeard. We can hear you typing, Ratbeard. We can hear you typing, Ratbeard.
Although let me
Anyway.
find out why.
Ratbeard.
Although let me
Anyway.
find out why.
Ratbeard.
Although let me
Anyway.
find out why.
Ratbeard.
Okay, that should be better. Can everyone hear now? No echo? Okay, great. Okay, so we're here today to talk about raids and the new Crying Sky raid that just released in the summer update. We have with us a couple of the devs and a fellow writer, Stormcloud.
Hello. I am Stormcloud. For those of you who don't know me, I am a prominent member of the Twitter, or now called X, community for the 101 games. I'm an avid dual schooler. I'm a hardcore raider. So let's talk about raids.
Yeah, so first we'll introduce our guests here today with us, the Wizard101 devs. If you guys like to introduce yourself in no particular order.
Sure. Artie Rogers, design director at KI. Here for the giggles.
I'm Cam, associate designer. I work on various things, including this raid. Woohoo! And I'm also known as Hephaestus or King Festus, as I stream on Twitch. And Ratbeard's mic died.
That's not good.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, somebody else go.
I think it's
Okay.
a skill. I think it's probably a skill issue.
Yes, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, that would do it.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
We
Mhm.
can
Yep, we can hear
indeed.
you.
Okay. Hi, this is Ben Durbin, design lead, Ratbeard.
So I think the first topic we wanted to dive into regarding raids would be the investments to get into the raid itself and what players have to do to raid and how that translates into loot. Stormcloud, would you like to take it away?
Yep. I will indeed. All right. So, Azoth, that's a key ingredient. I think the Azoth places to farm for it. It's pretty good now. But I do want to touch on the Animus. So, main issue with getting your resources for the key is getting the Animus. The mob spawn rate, you only get one per zone, and I believe it was mentioned somewhere that they spawn every 30 seconds if there's not already one present, that being the Crying Sky Revenant. Unfortunately, this encourages realm hopping, and it makes it a bit more of a competitive environment to get your hits in to collect your Azoth, or not Azoth, Animus. So I have a few suggestions. We can discuss the implications of them. One of them being increasing the max amount of mobs per zone to probably around 2 or 3. That way people can stay in the same realm. They won't have to realm hop. And another option would be to possibly add these creatures to other areas of Azteca, like cenotes, Salt Meadow Swamp, other zones, so that you don't have everybody flocking in on one zone.
Was there a question in there? What?
It's more so this we're more so going for discussion than just asking questions. So I wanted to know what your
Okay.
thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, so like adding more, increasing the availability of the mobs, or
Yeah, I mean, adding mobs to other zones is something we talked about internally. I don't recall what the end of that conversation was, but yeah, the intention of putting it out there is to get the higher level players in lower worlds, but and it is cool to see a big group of people farming, but yeah, that we don't want it. It wasn't really our intention to make it a super competitive thing.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I've heard like, hey, our guild is claiming these 4 realms or whatever, and yeah.
And you had mentioned, Cam, that you only wanted to have one spawn per zone.
Well, 1 per fight.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
if they're spread out, there could be more than 1 in a zone.
Yeah, I do think that's a great idea because if you have more places to farm, players will still be rubber banding. They'll still be returning to old Azteca zones, but it would increase the availability of the mob, just so that it's not as much of a competitive environment just to get your raid key.
I would say the area right off of 3 points that we initially go to in that quest does have a lot of areas with different mobs that are all self-isolated, so it could provide a better area to let those mobs roam around without letting any of them group up, so that we'd be able to farm like 4 at a time or something like that, prevent any of that, but then still make it more accessible so the players can all be in like one area and are still encountering each other, but not necessarily fighting over the one resource.
Right. Yeah, I think those are good suggestions. Like, I mean, yeah, ideally the goal wasn't to push people into unpopulated zones. The goal was to try to get folks revisiting old worlds, and mingling with people who might be leveling there, other things, and then also having people from different guilds sort of encounter each other and things like that. And it's working, but it has caused some other issues. We knew there would be issues putting things into the public zone, but we had goals in mind, and so we were going to see how it worked and then make adjustments to make it fun for people. So, and like Cam said, we have been discussing some adjustments we'd want to make, and then we just have to kind of decide when we have time to make them, which could be soon.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, and
All right, thank you.
before we go any further, we do have another guest here today. I believe Rand has decided to join us. Rand, would you like to say hi?
Rand.
Oh, yep. Hey.
It's Rand.
And so then, continuing on with resource investment, energy is another big factor when going into the raid. We have to magic touch first. Everyone has to magic touch, so that's easily 5 energy right there. And then inside the raid, there are multiple mechanics where our energy could continue to be spent. For the jail players are getting locked in there, or for some of the puzzles, we do need to be able to fish and use reveal cantrips along with the sigil inspired cantrips. I know are popular by the players, or the mana cantrips, mana and health cantrips, to restore some of their health and mana after those fights, or for essentially if they make a mistake, sort of a way to self-correct to try to keep the raid on track. We're curious how that would factor into how you guys are developing the loot model and assigning those rewards, and how much energy is playing a part in that, or if it's currently playing a part in that. and if you'd be open to reevaluating how it is affecting the loot, because I do feel that it is a costly resource, and after that first raid run, your energy is kind of depleted. You either have to pop another energy elixir to keep maintaining what you did last time, or you kind of have to dial back the strategy at risk of failing a little more.
Yeah, so with what Shadow's saying, I think a main problem with the energy is that it ends up being pay to win in the sense that if you want to continue raiding, even if you fail to run, right? If you want to continue raiding, you're still going to end up having to, say, buy an energy elixir just so you can either magic touch the gate or use cantrips to heal or regenerate mana.
Right. So I'm trying to. Okay, so the question there was how does energy factor into the
loot model or the loot
loot
system.
model? Yeah. So there's a certain amount of energy that is required by the raid, as in obviously casting magic touch on the gate, and the energy required to catch the fish for spawning the boss and such. So we have a model of how much on average it should take for those required energy costs, and that is given back to you in the loot drops. But of course, players can spend more energy if they want to shore up weaknesses and accelerate certain recover from a mistake or accelerate certain things like with sigil spells and whatnot. So for anything on top of that, that's extra energy there that will be solved with more efficiencies, by optimizing the strategies and such.
So would you say that once the raid is optimized to the point where players can win multiple times in a single key, would you say that we shouldn't be needing the amount of energy that would be greater than what we start with?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now another just brief moment, another brief idea I wanted to suggest about energy is, now obviously we haven't seen the drops from the final boss, but it would be pretty nice if we could get maybe a guaranteed energy elixir every run. It would definitely push forward, continuing to try and get wins after you get one on a key, and help you maintain your energy even if you spent maybe a little too much, just as a reward for winning the raid that can help you in further raids.
Well, yeah, so the players haven't seen the loot from the final boss nor the side ones, I don't think.
No, I think
We
maybe
have
in Test
seen,
Realm the Voice of Death was defeated once or twice.
Yeah, so Voice of Death was defeated in Test Realm, I believe, and I have seen screenshots of Xibalba Elemental being defeated. So we know roughly the loot table on those, which is actually something we were going to get to a little bit later on. But while we're talking about what the final boss drops, so seeing as the raid has not been beaten and it's hard to provide input, would you be willing to discuss what the who and how drops are looking like, or is that something you'd rather wait for the players to see for themselves?
Well, I could speak in general terms.
Yeah.
I would say that, like the first raid, the rewards are back heavy, so you will get the majority of the drops from the end. Not and while you get a little bit along the way from defeating the various priests and such, yeah, you're gonna get the majority of the things from the main guy.
So most of the value of the key is on the drops from the final boss.
Yes.
Okay. And then, while we're still on the topic of final boss drops, so seeing as all we have to go off of is Voracious Void as of now, I do want to mention or briefly go over some improvements to those drops. So obviously, the raid first came out. We only had one piece dropping. Now, first of all, I want to ask, are there multiple sets dropping from the final boss? Because from the priestesses, we've only seen the Unhao gear. Will we have multiple sets dropping, or is it just one set?
So, yeah, there's a few improvements we made from the first one when it comes to the drop model in terms of how it's done. Yeah, before it was in the first raid, you get like one of each set or something,
Yeah,
and
one void,
there's
one
like a
void.
chance on the mini bosses along the way. There was like a chance to get one set or the other. This time we went with more of a model similar to Novus, where you have one set that's dropped and the other one is crafted. so
is the
it'll
crafted
mitigate the
set-
RNG.
Yeah, so is the crafted set like Eternal in the sense that as long as you have the equivalent Hunhao gear piece, you can get whatever this other set is?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's nice. Is there any form of pity system for the Hunhao gear itself?
Yes, there is, and you'll see it. I believe it's set up so that you see it after you win.
Is that
Okay,
where
so-
the Jabalba reagent I think we saw on the test realm vendor comes into play?
Okay.
Right.
Like,
So
is
are
that like
we-
similar to pixels? I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, in a way, it's
Okay.
it's the reagent that
Are
is
we gonna
used
have to put
craft.
in any other investments other than these Jabalba shards into crafting the gear?
I don't know how specific I should be with the
Mhm.
with the recipes, but yeah, everything you need should be from the raid.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Okay, so the side bosses, if we discuss the side boss loot, from what we've seen, it is very much so like Millispeeder from the Voracious Void Raid. The thing with that is, with the rewards being very similar to Millispeeder, what do you think the incentive should be to try to defeat these Azteca raid bosses, as opposed to, say, if you want the elixir drops going back to Millispeeder from the other raid? Because as it currently stands, Millispeeder is a lot more simple to get to. I would also say simpler to kill. And so, is there anything that we should look out for, at least in the design perspective, to go for um, the Crying Sky side bosses instead of Millispeeder?
Well, in theory, I mean, the drops for I think it was you're saying that it's similar to Millispeeder.
Yes.
In what it drops, that's true. The difference here is that as players who have done the first raid a lot know, the Millispeeder doesn't guarantee you elixir.
Yeah. So does that mean that these two side bosses guarantee elixir drops?
Well, the one that does the elixir does, but the other one is something else, which I don't think has been seen before. So I'll wait to comment on that one.
Ooh, a mystery.
But
Interesting.
yeah, as players optimize the strategies, it should be doable to get the side bosses done at the same time, like Millispeeder. Like
And
at
then-
first, Millispeeder was something nobody did, but then they slowly figured out how to incorporate that.
Yeah.
And then, like, with the side bosses, what is the goal of those? I guess I'd say, is it to just make sure that players have something to keep them busy with, or are
It's a
they
stretch goal, I guess.
or
It's
are
fun.
they
It's fun to have a. Sorry, continue.
are they like sort of meant to be something that that might be worth pursuing independently?
It's a good question. Yeah, I suppose you could. They're kind of they were set up to be stretch goals so that there's more to do as players get better at it. Maybe uh, someone else can comment on the use of the side bosses. Because they were originally from the first raid, which I didn't have as much of a hand in. Or do you have any thoughts on that?
I love pirate.
I love pirate. No, I mean, yeah, side bosses are what they are. They're supposed to be stretch goals for once the players master the main challenge, then we give other people who are still wanting to be even more challenged some goals in addition to things that we kind of plan for most people to be able to accomplish. That's why the badge was the 1% of the 1%, because when it's difficult to do, and in this case it's also difficult to do while dealing with everything else, so that's why it's there.
Yep.
Yeah, going off that point about giving hardcore players something else to do, right? I think a big problem a lot of players seem to be having with the raid in general is that the drops are not very desirable, right? So some people may only play certain game modes of the game, such as PvE or PvP, whatever it may be. There are certain metas. Obviously, some templates may be better than others. So the gear is not always something that everybody wants to chase after. I think in the Voracious Void Raid, Nullity was very appealing to players who like to min-max for PvE, though I understand you guys don't want to put the best gear behind raids. And Void seemed to be catered around PvP a little bit more, just based on their templates and the pieces that need to be filled for certain PvP setups. So I was wondering what other loot ideas you guys would be willing to incorporate into the raid. I think that hardcore players especially are big fans of cosmetics. So stuff like Scroll of Fortune items that have been shelved since their initial debut, permanent mounts that maybe are in the crown shop, maybe they are in packs that few people open anymore. Um, or even the Scroll of Fortune permanent mounts. These are all suggestions that could maybe get more people interested in the drops of the raid. What would you have to say about incorporating these cosmetic rewards as alternatives for players who don't want the gear?
What does that
What?
mean?
Yeah,
Is that
maybe
funny?
you can start this one.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, we faced same criticisms in the first raid about the lack of desirability for the rewards. And the problem, I guess, is that everybody's pursuing different things. And so it's, how do we zero in on exactly what is an issue? Is it an issue, or is it just an issue with, like, for instance, the advanced combat meta from a stat standpoint is expected to be changing. And so what is desirable now may not be desirable later. Like we saw that with the Aeon gear once Shadow was fixed. But the point kind of still stands. We're looking to re-itemize and revisit jewels in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the ancillary impact of that to the desirability of the templates that are currently dropping in the raid? Well, they may end up becoming more valuable as the meta shifts in response to changes we make with how we itemize and modify the acquisition methods of the jewels. And
Yeah.
we're looking at pet
Right now,
talents doing stuff too.
Right now,
Yeah,
the raid gear has a new look to it, correct? And so it's you're kind of presenting a weird argument, which is to say that our broader PvE community isn't interested in the stats on the gear, and so they would be more interested in cosmetic stuff. Doesn't really seem to track. Like for me, I'm far more interested in figuring out what we can do to attract players who might not be interested in the gear, but nevertheless are interested in power, right? For lack of a better term, some kind of power escalation. And I don't think that cosmetics would do that. Now, I mean that is not a no. I mean, by all means, if you guys are jazzed by cosmetics, I'm down for that. But I'm not sure that cosmetics is going to solve this particular problem, which is how do we entice people to play the raid when there is not a clear increase in power available in the raid, which seems
Ye-
to be the
Yeah,
whatever
I
crux
would
of the
I
problem.
would agree with that because cosmetics aren't necessarily my vibe, and I do think there are some suggestions that I'd like to see that could maybe more work with that idea. I know that when cantrips were originally introduced, we saw that teaser video back on KI Live last year ago in spring, and it showed that unicorn cantrip spell being, used in I think one of the caramel mob fights, and we have a spot in our cantrips menu that allows us to have the inspired cantrips, and we were sort of told by Buttersfield, I believe, that eventually we would see those, but so far those have only remained as TCs, and we haven't been able to learn them permanently. And so I was wondering if that would be something that would feel more like a bit more power for the player that they could go into the raid and maybe Hun Ha drops the Horn of Plenty cantrip as one of the drops, and players would be able to keep that permanently. And it's something that would be universally desirable for the rest of the game.
I mean, yeah, we like for the first raid, we did sort of solicit reward ideas from the community at large and integrated them, and then I think Cam ended up using that as a model, sort of moving forward into this raid. But we're always open to suggestions as to different things that people believe are widely desirable, and then we don't mind integrating them also. Um, Recycled rewards generally aren't received well by the community at large. They, it's sort of, I don't know. Well, they say lazy as if it means the person who would have made that thing isn't doing something else. But so that's not where we normally look to first for that. So we try to do something that's different and new, and maybe maybe a learned cantrip is an option, or other things. And then like I said, even as we finish once we do the jewel revisit, uh, we can go back and revisit the raid rewards to reflect however we've developed the loot map for jewels. We may say we want to see certain jewels, come from these locations, and one may be the raid, and then we can integrate it.
Yeah, I definitely think
Yeah.
jewels would be a better reward. I know some of the ones we have now. I think that's been a fair complaint from the community is that the current jewels we've all seen before, we saw them in Novus, or if they're the 145 jewels, we saw them in Lemuria. So it's supposed to be a filler reward, but it's also not anything special. And so I'm hoping that post jewel audit there are new new jewels that might feel a bit better on the raids, or might be
Yeah.
something that we
So
haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, we know a lot of things about how the jewels are organized systemically as a problem from a design side, and so that's why we're hoping to revisit that in the fall and get it more balanced, I guess.
yeah. So about what you said with the recycled items, right? Now, I really love how we have supposedly a unique appearance for this raid gear. I think that's great. And I think that if you're including something that's brand new, that's for this raid, like a unique appearance for the gear, I think that justifies adding, like I said, some previously exclusive cosmetics that haven't returned in a while. I don't think players would be as disappointed to see um, these items like past Scroll of Fortune gear cosmetics like that, if we also got them alongside new items like the raid gear, for example. I also think that regarding the like the power scaling, players wanting to go into the raid and expect having power scaling, I think that could be incorporated possibly onto the Jabal Bashard reagent that you said was used for the pity system and that we saw in Test Realm, so that perhaps we could use it as a universal gear crafting reagent. So much like pixels in Novus or whatever pixel equivalent we have in Wallaroo, the pity system reagent from the raid could possibly be used as a substitute for whatever is in Wallaroo, for example, right? That way you have you're essentially farming in advance for something that will still have an alternate method once the next world comes out. But it definitely would increase player incentive because you can get the better gear faster. You can focus on maybe whatever else, like the pin upgrades or the jewel upgrades, whatever jewel audit is coming, instead of focusing on gear if you already have those Jabal Bashard reagents stocked up, you know?
Well, I mean, what you're kind of saying is, and I've mentioned this before. We put rewards in specific places to encourage players to do specific things, right? So, just a perfect example. We want players to run the raid, and so we need to put things there that the players will be interested in order to get them to run the raid. But it sounds like you're kind of saying you want us to put things in the raid so that you can do this thing and not do the other thing, right? But by making the reagents here sort of universal in terms of crafting, you're making an explicit case to let you run this raid instead of doing the thing that allows you to craft that other gear. So that's just something we have to take a look at and decide if we want you to have your, I guess, a more fungible experience.
Yeah, and I will
Yeah,
also
we
say that
because we've had conversations about, so the loot system or the pity system, did it start back in catacombs or whatever? Anyway, at some
yeah.
point, but we've been having conversations about how this system will grow over time, how it will develop. But then what Ben is talking about is an issue. So like like if we let you, let's just say we let you transmute any world reagent into a future world's reagent. Well, then that kind of starts to throw off our expected engagement model because you're able to just sort of accumulate this wealth as you move forward. And so then all of a sudden, because it becomes a complex problem to solve. What we don't want to do is keep creating new reagents all the time, but at the same time, it does serve a purpose. And so we've got to find a balance there somewhere. And then just related to kind of the reuse of previously released rewards, I mean, some of that is in partnership with the product division, like Decius heads that up. And certainly, like certain things that are exclusive, it's important for them to remain exclusive, like the Pioneer Dragon Pet that was with the initial beta testers. It's important that we don't make those things widely available through other means because it has a meaning in itself. And so, like one of the criticisms of the Novus pack was that it included everything that you would have gotten had you actually experienced Novus, but put it into a pack. So then all of a sudden it diminishes the meaning of the visuals that accompany the accomplishment of finishing a whole set from the Novus, the array of Novus bosses. And that makes sense, but it's, in principle, it's a similar thing. Like exclusivity needs to mean something, otherwise it doesn't mean anything, right? So, we can't just take things that are intended to be exclusive, and its exclusivity reflect some sort of meaning, and then all of a sudden make it not exclusive because then all of a sudden it doesn't mean that anymore.
Yeah, I do think I favor more rather just having exclusive rewards in the raid than trying to bring up back other stuff that because then you might run into the issue also of like if the players that got those rewards years ago or whatever, then they also don't see the reason to raid.
Yeah,
I
that's fair.
think that concludes our points on the loot system, and I think we wanted to talk about some of the different raid mechanics in here in the Crying Sky raid.
Yep. So we'll start out with stat maxes, right? So I do want to ask, just as a blanket question, what was the intended design philosophy for implementing the stat maxes? Obviously, it was throughout all advanced combat, but specifically in the raid, what was the end goal to implement this?
Well, enforcing the stat maxes. Like you mean like adding level scaling to the
Yeah.
raid?
Just enforcing stat maxes at particular levels.
Yeah. So having level scaling on this zone at 160 it has the effect of enforcing the stat maxes, and that's just to I guess get players to or allow us to more predictably. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it lets us provide a more balanced experience, right? So
Right.
Yeah.
there's an argument from players that they like to min-max things, they like to find interesting setups and min-max things. The problem with that is that it ends up forcing us to, in some cases, cater the difficulty to those spikes, which means that maybe one person is having fun and 11 people aren't. Whereas if we make it a more predictable and balanced experience, the combats can be more interesting across the board. It's easier for multiple people to find a place, to find a role in those combats than say have everything revolve around one hitter with a crazy high damage stat. Although but keep in mind the stat maxes are pretty darn high. They're designed to account for most builds. Now we know, as we talked about our template system, you can exceed what we call the stat max. So stat max is a bit of a misnomer there. It's better to think of it as the design intended maximum. But we don't want to cater the experiences to those giant spikes. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree with that. I also do think that it does, in some ways, promote dual schooling, though I will say that something we will be discussing later on in the roundtable entails the specific strategies that players use in the raid, and how that may be not be diverse enough based on what I assume your intended players.
you think we're
pool
going to
would be.
discuss that?
Well, it is on our plan to discuss, and we will see if you are willing to talk about that. But before we go ahead and talk about that, I do want to shift the focus to the cheats. So we're still talking about raid mechanics. So to start off, Kameka and Yataxa, two of the bosses, have enemy-specific conditional setups. So Kameka being weaknesses, Yataxa being traps. The only issue with this is it's random. So when you join the battle at the end of the round, it puts two of that specific hanging effect on two random people, and the main issue is that it can be the same person and instantly set up the conditional on the first round.
Yeah. So that was actually addressed in the patch last night.
Okay.
So if you go in now, you can see how that was addressed. But yeah, like you pointed out, you can get ruined by RNG in that way, and so now it was changed in a way such that it's still difficult, but it won't get you in one turn anymore.
Okay. And
One
I
of the
also
reasons.
wanted.
One second.
Yeah,
One
go
of
ahead.
the reasons that we have these fights set up the way they are, where there's typically going to be a boss, and then there's going to be a confounding minion that's added to the fight, right? Is so that you can look at the. I mean, it's for the people who are keyed into the Rochambeau, right? You look at the pairing that they have, and you say, okay, we can't use this and this, but we can use this and this, right? That's what it's designed to do. And the reason to make it random in the first place is in order to, well, first of all, make the experience different every time, right? It also is a part of the executional strategy. You want players to be able to go in and be ready for anything. Now, does that mean that occasionally the you will get a bad matchup? I mean, here we're talking about the lose moose, right? That's kind of the famous one from the first raid, and players would say, okay, that's a matchup we don't like. We're just gonna quit and start over because we don't like that particular matchup. I think that this raid is better about that. It's not quite as bad as that particular combo was, but there will be times where randomly you'll see something that you may not be prepared to deal with, and so I would say be prepared to deal with that because we do want
Yeah.
it to be different every time, and it's just the nature of those particular matchups. Now, all that being said, I mean the biggest probably the biggest problem with RNG in this particular raid, I think, is the rain that moves around. And there are things that you can do to mitigate that, but it is random, more or less random. It's pretty random, and
Yeah.
it can make things more difficult, and you will have to adjust your strategy on the fly in order to go through there. And I think that's important. I would rather that players see it as something that they need to adapt to on the fly, but realistically, I think that a lot of players see it as something where um, they want to be able to identify as quickly as possible if this raid is going to be scuffed or not, and if they can find out fairly early that the raid's not going to go their way, they'll exit out in order to get a more efficient playthrough on a second attempt. And I don't really think there's any way to fix that. I mean, it seems to be a very natural economic response to things, right? We only have so much time to beat this raid. The raid gate is only open for a certain amount of time. It's probably better for us to restart. If we're certainly in the first 5 minutes or so, it's probably better to restart. And I find that um, understandable but disappointing. So,
Yeah. So, talking about how minion spawns and also just the bosses in general restrict you away from certain hanging effects and promote other hanging effects. I think Yatoxa um, is criminal to this issue because Yatoxa is an ice boss, high resist, um, counters everything except dots and hots, being ice fire. And this ends up being a very long and spammy fight because the only two hanging effects you can run, assuming a minion does not intervene, are either hots or dots. And the issue with these gambits is they are low pip, they are low damage, and in their nature, they are very spammy. So what Yatoxa ends up being is just a spamming match of long animation spells such as Fire Scion, which is Burning Notice, and that ends up just taking a ton of time. It's not very strategy oriented, and if you want to deal a lot of damage, the only way to do that is with hot and dot gambits, and since the resist is so high, you need a bunch of them to kill.
Well, there are some other tools out there for you.
Yeah, Stupefy.
That'll help.
There is
That'd be
Stupefy, yeah.
That and some others that that you could utilize, but yeah, the hot and dot gambits are the lowest pip, so they'll do the least amount of damage as than the
Yeah.
other two who are at 9 and 11 pips. So that's we made that change a bit ago.
Yeah, I'm not saying
For
that
reasons.
should be changed,
well,
but
that
I
can
think
be
that the
that can be
boss should
factored into the model. I find it
Yeah.
curious that you described that one as not very strategic, but you don't level the same complaint about all the other four gambits. Like, what's not strategic about hots and dots, whereas blades and traps and weaknesses, the other ones are strategic. That seems to be an
I
odd
wouldn't say
criticism to
they're
level at it.
strategic, and I think I'd say that my issue kind of with it is that it feels a little limiting just overall that most of the battles come down to two hanging effects when
yeah.
most of our school, like all of our Pat B spell elements have multiple different ways to leverage things. So like if I'm fighting a boss that does counter DOTs, but they spam weaknesses, I as a myth wizard can't use like Stone Colossus, for example. It would be a bad move. And instead, for some of these fights, it seems like we're really just running burst hit spells and spells that don't do anything. I think we started packing Stone Colossus TCs in our deck that are just the hit version because it does more damage, and that
Yep.
doesn't leave us open to drawbacks or stuff like that. And so I feel like in that regard, that's kind of where most of the raid battles are pushing us, is to just use burst damage, even for bosses that do counter dots and stuff like that. It feels kind of limiting because they're treating the dot as a hanging effect, but in
Totally.
reality a dot is actually a way to deal damage, or you're supposed to be able to, that's Fire's entire identity. They're supposed to be able to use damage that way, but for I think there's the balance boss that might say no, you
You're not
shouldn't be.
you're not arguing that you would like to have more bosses that require non-burst dots to kill them, are you?
uh can you repeat that?
I really can't understand what you're saying. I mean, in any case, right? There are some paths to success that work, and there are some that don't work, right? So you may have, A, B, C, D don't work, but E and F do work, right? We agree on that.
Yes.
And so you've sort of called out an issue where the overtime, like if there's two different things that we might be discussing here. Like I understand the spammy nature of it and having to wait for the dots. So that's one conversation. But it's got nothing to do with whether it's strategic or not, or even how powerful they are. You're just the animation time is longer. That's one conversation. But it sounds to me like you're saying that for some reason, hot and dot gambits are less strategic than other ones, and I don't understand that particular.
No, I'm not saying that. I know Stormcloud was kind of hinting at that, but I'm kind of going for more of,
Why
even
would you
with
use Stone
even more
Colossus as a hit? As a hit, though, I guess is my question. Why are you using
uh,
Stone Colossus? And by
because
the way, we might very quickly be transitioning into a conversation where we're simply making the observation that you're trying a strategy that's not very successful. By definition, it's not successful.
right.
But why would you use a six pip non-conditional hit? What is the set of
Um,
circumstances where you feel that that's the better choice than a gambit?
it's the better choice now, but I feel like it would be more strategic to encourage the conditional Stone Colossus version. I would like I would like it to work more like Beast Moon, because right now I feel like we're just doing one thing. We're either trap spamming, we're either blade spamming, or we're either dot spamming, and I don't think that's strategic. I, as a myth wizard, would like to be able to go in and use that Stone Colossus to counter a weakness boss and put that dot there and let my fire companion turn that dot into extra damage. And I feel like in Beast Moon that
So
flow
can you?
works a lot better, but in here, when we're limited to two hanging effects, that's not the case.
So yeah. So right now, you're saying there's not a, well, like
There's
there
not a
there
good
are
way to
scenarios where
pivot,
you're
I
fighting
guess.
somebody who might put a weakness on you that you can use dots against. Like I'm sure there's combinations out there where that would be a good move.
Yeah, some of
Um,
them.
but I don't know if I understand I don't know if I understand what you're getting at.
I
Just like
think what the issue here is that you're looking at spells with BPATs that have synergies that aren't exactly always forward, right? So like Stone Colossus, a myth would probably be your best choice if you're going against a boss that has shields and weaknesses, right? But Stone Colossus, for example, um, like on Kameka's a weakness boss. If you were to use Stone Colossus on Kameka, you would end up having your dot removed and being turned back
I don't do
into,
that.
Well then, yeah, yeah.
Don't do that.
yeah. Well, that's just an example of a situation in which we're more restricted because of the boss cheats
Well, yeah,
on
I'm kind of sitting
the
here with my
strategy that
mouth
we
hanging
can
open.
employ.
I'm sitting here kind of stunned at this. We've understood all together. We understand that the bosses and minions are set up so that some avenues work and some avenues don't work, and you're saying we wish that we could use some of our avenues that don't work more often, right?
I mean, that is, yes, I feel like it would be it.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that it's inflated. It's trying to inflate the difficulty by saying you can only use these two hanging effects per fight, but I feel like
Sure.
players are I feel like it would feel a lot better if it wasn't so limited, because that's how we end up with, a lot of
It
teams
would
are
by
running.
definition be
But
less. How is that more strategic to allow you to have more?
well, and if you
Because
look at the full array of the bosses, there's a wide spectrum of strategies. Each, right?
But like so far it's coming down to running fire, myth, and storm, because
You
for
think it
dodge,
is?
yeah, what
But
you're
how
for
many
saying,
beat it?
Let us know when you
well,
win.
that's true, that's true.
um,
Let us know
but
if that works for you. It
but it
might.
feels if
Might
it
work.
I do think it just feels limiting that we don't like have that pivot, or we can't. And I know there is an issue with if the bosses aren't too restrictive, then it's
But
just
what you
free, like a free PvE strat, and I'm not like I'm not trying to get to that point with the
no, but
bosses, but I feel like
what you're describing as your team composition is inherently limiting. You're
yes,
saying we
and
only
because
bring myth, fire, and storm, and then
yes,
you're
and we feel
complaining
that.
about you're complaining about the weaknesses that opens up for your team
well, I
because
think the
it's too
issue with this
limiting.
is
But you're already limiting by excluding
I
four
wouldn't
of the seven
say
schools.
I
That's what
want to
I'm
say their
trying. Yeah,
weaknesses. I'm not saying their weaknesses. I'm saying I wish it felt better to bring all the schools. I don't think right now it
I
doesn't
got you.
feel like we should bring all the schools. It feels like we
yeah.
Well,
should bring
how,
these
how
three schools, and that's
I
it.
got you.
well but what clearer indication could it be that you should be bringing more than those three schools than failing? What would be a better way for
So
us to encourage you to bring more schools?
that okay.
I
So
feel
that
like
actually
that's
ties
like,
into a point that I was planning on
oh
mentioning
boy,
later, but I do want to mention now.
I
The
was
raid
gonna go there
timer.
too.
Now, at first glance, obviously, the raid timer, removing it, or by removing it, I mean setting the timer to the same timer that's on the gate. So you're restricted to 3 hours at maximum for a raid. And the reason why is because when you are running with a timer, right, you have a burden upon you, um, in the sense that you have to complete certain actions within a specified amount of time if you want a chance at winning. So the issue with that is it ends up resulting in the schools that you pick will end up being the top damaging, top offensive schools for every single gambit. That is why we have teams with only fires, storms, and myths, because storms are the best for blaze
But
and
it's not
weakness.
working. But it's not working.
But it's fastest. It's you can't go
But
any
it's the
faster with
fastest,
the
yeah.
with a
So you want
You
to
death.
can
fail faster. You want to fail
no.
faster.
The issue here is if we're already running into the issue where even when we are trying to be as optimal as possible, we do not have time, even with a very, very fast team in the sense that we're running full hitters, we do not have time to defeat all four bosses and get to the final boss.
Well,
And
I
that
guess
is
I
with
if I
running the
may,
most
Yeah, go
offensive
ahead,
schools
Cam.
for every single gambit.
yeah, if I may, this is best. It's best to look at raid 1 in this case because everybody ran, fires, storms in Vanguard,
Exactly. Yes.
and to be as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they beat every run with 10 minutes left on the clock, nobody was, at least to my knowledge, people weren't running uh, other schools because even though they had the room to on the timer.
There's
Yes.
always an
So
incentive to go as fast as possible.
Right.
for the drops, yes. And that's why I think if you were to
Well,
open up the timer, right, you would allow people to initially run more diverse strategies without. So, a main issue is that if you run a strategy in which you're not running the most offensive schools for every single gambit, you are inherently sacrificing your resources because there is very little chance that you will be able to get a win on your first 3 hour raid session, right? Everybody sees running not the most hyper offensive schools as a
As a
as a
negative, as a bad time.
sacrifice. Yeah, as a negative, right? So by opening up the raid timer, you would be letting people initially try a wide variety of different strategies, incorporating different schools, different gambits, different things without the worry of a timer just ticking down and stopping you from winning. On top of that, you would get a taste for the cheats of the final boss, which means you would be able to better strategize to fit in maybe not the best hyper offensive schools. You would
It
get
sounds like you're describing
motivation.
Test Realm.
Or you wanna practice raid with like no rewards? Is that what you're asking
That's
for?
another one. Yeah.
That could be another possibility, but I
I'm
think like
kind of
the
against that
main
idea, personally.
Well, I mean, because the timer is integral. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the coordination and distribution of resources and coming up with a executional strategy is integral to a raid experience in general.
well, yes, but that's why the timer's on the gate. If
No,
you
that's
have
why
the
the
timer
timer's
on
on.
the
No. That's why the timer's on the raid.
But if the
But
timer's on the
I
gate and you have unlimited time per raid, your incentive to optimize, your incentive to be coordinated is to get the work done to get your bonus value out of your key. The issue we're facing right now is nobody wants to raid, nobody wants to put in their resources when they're not going to get their value out of their key. So by making a raid not have a specific time limit, you are letting them get, if they are coordinated, if they play right, at least one win, and that's already motivating. That increases player morale. They are more likely to want to continue raiding, to continue optimizing, to fit in more runs into that one gate, even though there's no specific timer on each raid. You
It
fit in
sounds
more
like what you
time.
want is a way to be able to run Fire, Myth, and Storm and win.
Well,
Because
I
I don't remember this complaint in the last raid. And as
It's a,
Ben and Cam already pointed out,
Mhm.
they were finishing the raid with 10 minutes left and people still weren't exploring other strategies.
Yeah.
mean,
Well,
I
think
think
the
I think
reason
that
why
was
people don't.
about a complaint from the last raid is because like that's kind of like the dream of mine is that I want an ice wizard to be desirable in the raid. I want someone to say we need an ice wizard for this raid, and that was something I didn't like in the last raid, and it's something that I think is continuing in this raid where the the timer is limiting, so you have to go for the offensive schools to be faster, but it's also and so we're kind of locked into this uh,
And the other
play
thing
style where
is,
we have to use those storm, myth, and fire. We can't
yeah.
deviate. And even though in the last
how
raid
do you
we
know that
could,
that's true?
Yeah.
How do you know that that's true?
That's what I'm trying to say. We
It's
can't
weird that that's the
test it out.
conclusion.
We
It's
won't
odd.
want to test it out. Players won't want to test it out if it means they think they're sacrificing their resources.
But
And
you're
so
losing
a lot.
already. That's why I don't understand.
Well,
You're
yeah,
Hey
already
guys,
at the.
guess what? It's 2 minutes to the hour. I don't want to jump in here
Oh,
and cut you
right.
guys
Yeah.
off,
Sure.
but we're at an hour here, and boy, howdy, did we talk about a bunch of stuff, didn't we?
we did.
So I just,
yes.
I don't want to cut it off, but I got to cut it off. We've got children to feed. I don't, but somebody in this room does. And I just wanted to give a chance for everybody to kind of end on a let's hug and all love the game note. So thank you to everybody. Thanks to Final Bastion for hosting this live stream for us and giving us a chance to answer some of the very pointed and excellent questions. It's great to have the concerns by the community certainly up front and addressed for us on the new things we're doing. So if anybody else wants to jump in here, I just wanted to say hi real quick because usually I'm kind of in the back seat. And to say, thanks for the roundtable.
Yeah, before we go, I would like to say if anyone hasn't yet in chat, if you want to type Azteca, capital A, Azteca into the chat for the chance to win a Aztecans Builder Bundle that was given to us graciously by Spark and the devs. So we would like to say thank you for that and for anyone else who won prizes that were given away during the stream. A nice thank you to Spark for those. And we'll go ahead and draw that right now. And it looks like Skylana has won that bundle. Congratulations. And then with that, we'd like to thank the devs for participating today in the roundtable and discussing some of these topics with us. It's been a pleasure. And
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun.
It's been
As
a
always,
pleasure.
cool to talk about stuff.
yep.
Yeah, and if you guys have any other questions about this, just email Rapbeard.
Oh.
Don't do that.
Oh, definitely. We know where to find Rapbeard.
Yay.
Yeah. Thank you guys again, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thank you, Pound and Bastion.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.